I was trying to do some math earlier today, just playing around with some economic figures on my phone, and I ran into a problem. I literally ran out of space on the screen.
Oh, I think I know where this is going.
I was trying to type out the current U.S. national debt, $38 trillion.
It's a number that defies the layout of a standard calculator app, doesn't it? It just gives you that little error message.
It really does. And frankly, once you get past the first, 12 zeros, my brain just sort of shuts off. It stops feeling like real money. It starts feeling like astronomical data. The distance to the next galaxy in millimeters. It feels like monopoly money. It feels fake.
That reaction, that feeling of this number is too big to be real, is actually, I think, a perfectly normal human response.
Okay.
But to the global financial system, that number isn't abstract art, it's a siren. A very loud, red, spinning siren. And right now that siren is, well, it's deafening.
Which brings us to today's deep dive. We are tackling a thesis that is honestly one of the most unnerving things I've read in a long time.
It's a heavy one.
We're looking at the latest analysis from Kim Chang-ik. And if you think this is just another episode about debt is bad, you really need to buckle up, because that is just the opening act.
The debt is just the catalyst. What Kim is describing is, he's describing a war.
A silent war.
A silent monetary war between the two biggest superpowers on the planet, China and the United States.
Right.
But it's not being fought with missiles or aircraft carriers. It's being fought with assets, specifically gold versus Bitcoin. And
the timeline here is what gets me. We're not talking about some distant future. We're talking about a potential transition from the world we all know, the petrodollar world where the U.S. is king, to something Kim calls the electro-Bitcoin era.
Right.
And he argues that we might be staring down the barrel of a Trump shock.
Which would be the modern digital sequel to the Nixon shock of 1971, a complete rewriting of the rules.
We are going to get into all of that. We're going to talk about why money is fleeing into gold, the terrifying difference between allocated and unallocated wealth, which, by the way, made me want to check the fine print on everything I own.
As it should.
And this wild, almost sci-fi theory that the U.S. might sell off its gold reserves to corner the Bitcoin market.
It sounds like a conspiracy theory until you actually look at the ledger. Then it just looks like, well, game theory.
So let's start with the basics. The mission of this deep dive is to figure out if the money in our pockets is about to change forever. But to do that, we have to talk about trust.
It all comes down to trust.
Why is money flowing into gold right now? Is it just because people like shiny rocks?
It's not about the rock, it's about the counterparty. Kim Chang-ik makes a very foundational point here. Throughout history, when people trust a government, when they trust the state to manage the ledger honestly, they hold the currency.
Okay.
Buy the bonds, they hold the paper.
Because the paper is convenient. It's easy.
Exactly. It's easy to move, it's easy to spend. But when that trust erodes, when the key currency nation, in our case, the U.S. starts posting numbers like $38 trillion in debt, the psychology shifts.
Right.
People stop looking for convenience and they start looking for real. They run to assets that have no counterparty risk. Rice, oil, coal. But the ultimate exit, historically, has always been gold.
So it's not just that they don't trust the U.S. to pay its debts, or is it more that they don't trust the way the U.S. will pay its debts?
That is the critical distinction. That's the whole ballgame right there. Look, if you or I rack up a massive credit card bill, we have two choices.
Right.
We can declare bankruptcy, which, ruins us.
Right.
Or we can practice austerity.
Right. We work harder, we spend less, we pay it off.
We pay it off. That is the naive view of debt that most citizens project onto their government.
We assume Uncle Sam is going to start mowing lawns and cutting coupons to pay off that $38 trillion.
Right. But a sovereign superpower doesn't mow lawns. They have a third option that you and I don't have. They own the printing press. And Kim points out very clearly that the U.S. government has no intention of paying off this debt in real terms. They intend to melt it.
Melt it? What does that mean?
It's the inflation tax. It's the most powerful and insidious tax there is. Think about it this way. If I owe you $100 and that $100 buys a week's worth of groceries, that's a heavy burden for me to pay back.
Sure, that's real value.
It's real value. But if I print money, if I double the money supply and then double it again until $100 only buys a single stick of gum.
Then paying me back is easy. It costs you nothing. You just hand me a piece of paper that's worth basically nothing, and legally, our debt is settled.
Precisely. The nominal amount, the number is the same. But the value, the purchasing power, has been transferred from you, the creditor, to me, the debtor.
You've stolen my wealth.
I have stolen your purchasing power without ever reaching into your pocket. The U.S. plan for that $38 trillion mountain is to inflate the currency until that mountain becomes a molehill.
And the rest of the world isn't stupid. China, Japan, Saudi Arabia, they see this happening.
It took them a few decades to fully accept the reality of it, but yes, they have realized that holding U.S. Treasury bonds is a losing game.
It's a trap.
It's a trap. You are holding an ice cube that is melting in a sauna. You are guaranteed to lose purchasing power over time. So they are opting out. They are looking for allocated assets.
Okay, we need to stop on this term because this was, for me, the most eye-opening part of the analysis. Allocated versus unallocated. Kim treats this as the most dangerous misunderstanding in modern finance.
It is.
I always assumed if I bought gold, I own gold.
And that is exactly what the financial system wants you to believe. But the mechanics are very, very different. Let's break this down.
Please do.
Allocated gold is the old school way, the way it's supposed to work. Imagine a classic Swiss bank vault. You walk in, you hand over your cash, and they take a specific gold bar, put it in a specific safety deposit box, let's call it safe number 33, and they hand you a key or a certificate. That certificate says the contents of safe number 33 belong to you and only you.
So if the bank goes bust or the manager runs off to the Bahamas?
It doesn't matter. You go to safe 33, you open it, and you take your bar. It is your property. It is allocated to you. The counterparty risk is basically zero, other than, a Mission Impossible style heist.
Right. Okay. But I can't just buy a gold bar on my trading app. So what am I buying when I buy gold on the stock market or through an ETF?
Now we get to the heart of it. You are buying unallocated gold. This is the modern standard. You are buying a claim on the price of gold.
A claim on the price.
You're not buying the thing itself. You are effectively shaking hands with the bank and saying, if gold goes up, you owe me the difference. If it goes down, I owe you. But, and this is the absolute kicker, there is no safe number 33.
There's no bar with my name on it.
Yeah.
Anywhere.
No. The bank might have some gold in a vault somewhere, but they operate on what's called a fractional reserve system. For every 1 ounce of physical gold they actually hold, they might have issued 50 or even 100 paper claims.
Wait, hold on. 100 to 1. That sounds completely fraudulent. If I go to a coat check at a concert and they give out 100 tickets for every 1 coat they actually have on the rack, that's a riot waiting to happen.
It's a perfect analogy. And it's perfectly legal in the futures markets because of the fine print. You aren't buying the metal, you're buying exposure. And here is the nightmare scenario Kim outlines. If trust breaks down, if there is a panic, what happens?
Everyone runs to the coat check at the same time.
Exactly. Everyone shows up with their paper ticket demanding their gold. But there is no gold. In that scenario, the unallocated holder gets nothing. Or, more likely, they get a cash settlement in a currency that is rapidly collapsing in value.
Which completely defeats the whole purpose of buying gold in the first place.
Of course.
I bought it to protect myself from the collapsing currency, and they're going to pay me out in that same collapsing currency.
Correct. Kim uses a very visceral metaphor here. He talks about the historical hyperinflation events, Weimar Germany, Zimbabwe, Argentina. When a currency dies, paper money becomes trash.
I've seen the pictures of people with wheelbarrows full of cash just to buy bread.
Yes, and he takes it a step further. It becomes fuel for the fire. People literally burned stacks of marks to heat their homes because it was cheaper than buying wood.
That image always haunts me.
Well, apply that to your investment portfolio. If you hold unallocated gold or unallocated bank deposits, you are holding potential fuel. You are holding a promise that can be broken. The people who hold the allocated assets, the physical bars, the land, the oil wells, they are the ones holding the fire extinguisher.
And Kim's argument is that we're on the verge of one of these run-on-the-bank moments, but on a global scale.
Yes. The smart money, the sovereign wealth funds, the central banks, they are moving from unallocated to allocated. And to understand why this is happening now, with such urgency, we have to look at history. Because as the saying goes, history doesn't repeat itself, but it certainly does rhyme.
And this takes us to the Nixon shock. Now, I learned about this in high school. It's just a bullet point. 1971, Nixon took us off the gold standard. End of story. But the way Kim tells it, it sounds like a geopolitical thriller.
It absolutely was. You have to set the scene. I'll go back a bit further to the 1920s first. After World War I, the British pound was the world's reserve currency. It was the dollar of its day.
The sun never sets on the British Empire and all that.
Exactly. But Britain was drowning in war debt. They had printed way too much paper money relative to the gold they had in the Bank of England, and people figured it out.
So they started trading in their pounds for gold. A run on the pound.
A classic run on the bank. Then we jump to 1944. Bretton Woods. The world is in ruins after World War II. The U.S. convenes all the major powers and says, look, nobody trusts the pound anymore, but we, the United States, we have 70% of the world's gold in our vaults. So trust the dollar. The dollar is as good as gold.
We have the gold, so we make the rules.
That was the deal. 1 ounce of gold is 35 U.S. dollars. Fixed. Guaranteed. And it worked for about 20 years. But then the 1960s roll around.
Vietnam.
The Vietnam War and Lyndon Johnson's Great Society, massive social spending, guns and butter.
And to pay for it all, they just turned on the printers.
They did. And the Europeans, specifically the French, started doing the math. They saw that the U.S. was printing way more dollars than they had gold to back them up. The ratio was completely broken. There's this famous story about Charles de Gaulle, the French president. He was a real thorn in the side of the U.S.
He didn't trust them.
He saw the writing on the wall. He essentially said, this is a scam. You're exporting your inflation to us.
Didn't he send a ship? I feel like I remember reading that.
He did. This is the amazing part. He sent a French naval vessel, a warship, to New York Harbor with the explicit instruction to sail up to the Federal Reserve, collect France's physical gold bars, and sail them back to Paris.
Wow. That's a power move.
It was the ultimate bank run. A sovereign nation showing up with military force to claim their allocated asset, and other countries started following suit. By 1971, the U.S. gold reserves were bleeding out. Fort Knox was emptying at an alarming rate.
So Nixon was cornered. He had no choice.
He was cornered, but Kim Chang-ik argues that Nixon's move was actually an offensive strategy, not just a defensive panic. See, at the time, American manufacturing was dying. The dollar was too strong.
Wait, a strong dollar is bad. I thought that was a good thing.
It's good for consumers who want to buy cheap imports. It's terrible for exporters. A strong dollar makes American cars and steel really expensive for foreigners to buy. Nixon wanted to crash the dollar to save American jobs and boost exports.
So the Nixon shock was a calculated rug pull.
Imagine the scene. It's August 15th, 1971. Nixon gathers his top economic advisors at Camp David. Super secret meeting. They literally cut the telephone lines so nobody can leak the news to the markets. It's a total blackout.
Wow.
They spend the weekend cooking up this plan. Then on Sunday night, Nixon interrupts the most popular show on TV. It was Bonanza to address the nation.
And he just drops the bomb. He tells the world the gold window is closed.
He severed the link. He told the world the dollar is no longer convertible to gold. It's just paper now. Take it or leave it. He defaulted on the Bretton Woods promise.
And what happened?
Chaos. But specifically, the price of gold exploded. It went from the official peg of $35 an ounce to over $700 an ounce in the following years.
So a 20 times increase.
A 20x increase. The dollar lost 95% of its value against gold in a decade.
Okay, 20x. That is the number I want you to keep in your heads. Because now, 50 years later, we are seeing the exact same setup. But the players have changed. It's not France sending a battleship.
It's China.
It's China. And they're not sending a ship. They're just quietly buying.
And China has been studying this history very, very closely. The source material specifically mentions that Beijing's top advisors read a book called Currency Wars, which was published back in 2005.
Okay.
That book is basically a manual on how the U.S. uses the dollar system to maintain its empire, to export debt and inflation.
It's like they got a hold of the opposing team's playbook.
And they studied it for 20 years. They realized that holding U.S. debt is a trap. If they ever get into a real conflict with the U.S. over Taiwan, for instance, the U.S. can just freeze their assets.
Which we saw happen.
We saw it happen to Russia when they invaded Ukraine. The U.S. and its allies froze hundreds of billions of dollars of Russian central bank reserves overnight. Just poof, gone.
That must have been the ultimate I told you so moment for the Chinese Communist Party.
It was the final confirmation. They knew they had to exit the dollar system. But they have a problem, a big one.
Nobody trusts the yuan.
Nobody trusts the yuan. Exactly. I can go anywhere in the world with a stack of $100 bills and buy things. If I show up with a stack of yuan, not so much.
So China is stuck. They want to kill the dollar,
Yeah.
but they can't replace it because nobody wants their currency.
This is where their strategy gets really, really clever. enter the Shanghai Gold Exchange. This is China's brilliant golden workaround. The source details a mechanism that effectively makes the yuan a gold-backed currency for any of its trade partners.
Okay, how does that work? It sounds complicated.
It's actually quite simple, like a triangular trade.
Yeah.
China goes to an oil producer, let's say Iran or Russia or even Saudi Arabia, and says, sell us your oil, we will pay you in yuan.
And the producer says, no thanks, we don't want your paper.
Right, but then China says, fine, but look at our Shanghai Gold Exchange. You can take this yuan and immediately, in the same second, convert it into physical gold bars on our exchange. And you can take those bars home with you today.
Wow. So it's like a money-back guarantee, but with gold. They're using gold to wash the currency risk.
Yes. They are saying, don't trust our paper, we don't blame you, but you trust gold, so trust this. This bypasses the US dollar completely. It allows China to buy real resources with paper money they can print, provided they have the physical gold reserves to back it up.
And this is causing the grain, the source talks about, this quiet movement of gold.
Correct. Physical gold is moving from west to east. It's leaving the vaults in London and New York, where it's often traded as paper, and it's ending up in vaults in Shanghai and Beijing, where it stays. It's allocated.
It's a slow-motion bank run on the West.
And here's the danger. If the Western markets, London and Chicago, are indeed operating on that 100-to-1 fractional reserve system we talked about, what happens when China and its allies quietly buy up all the actual physical coats in the coat check?
The market breaks. The price has to. I don't know what happens.
The price mechanism breaks. You could see a situation where the paper price of gold on your trading app says $2,500, but if you actually want to buy a physical ounce, dealers are charging $10,000.
A decoupling.
A total decoupling between paper and reality. It would expose the dollar system as naked. And at that point, the yuan, backed by the Shanghai Gold Exchange, suddenly looks like the most reliable currency in the world.
So the U.S. is backed into a corner. China is hoarding all the gold. The U.S. has $38 trillion in debt. If the U.S. tries to buy gold now to catch up, they would just drive the price through the roof and devalue the dollar themselves.
They'd be front-running their own collapse.
They can't win the gold game.
You can't beat a grandmaster at a game he's been practicing for 20 years while you were asleep. If you want a win, you have to flip the table. You have to change the game entirely.
And this is where we get to the Trump shock. This is the part of Kim's thesis that feels like it's straight out of a movie script. The idea that the U.S. government might pivot to Bitcoin.
It sounds radical, I know. But look at the advisors who may be surrounding a new administration. You have figures from the tech world, people like Elon Musk, people from the crypto sector. The thesis is that these advisors are telling the president, gold is the old game. It's analog. China won that round. Let's move the battlefield to the digital realm.
So what does that look like in practice? The source mentions something pretty extreme like selling the gold.
The proposal, as King lays it out, is that the U.S. could declare its gold reserves, the famous Fort Knox gold, as obsolete assets, relics of the 20th century.
I have to stop you there. Can you imagine the political optics of that? The president goes on TV and says, my fellow Americans, we are selling the family jewels, the gold bars that has symbolized American stability for a century to buy, magic internet money.
I mean,
Congress would have a stroke. The traditional banks would lose their minds. How is that even remotely feasible?
it's a massive political hurdle. You're absolutely right. The old guard, the Warren Buffetts, the Jamie Dimons of the world would fight this to the death. But you have to consider the alternative.
Which is?
A slow, managed decline. If the U.S. does nothing, the dollar slowly dies a death by 1,000 cuts as China's gold-backed system takes market share. The U.S. needs a Hail Mary, a shock.
So the logic is dump the asset that China loves and pump the asset that the U.S. dominates.
Exactly. Create a strategic Bitcoin reserve. We've already seen the legislation proposed, the Bitcoin Act, by Senator Loomis. The goal mentioned in the source is for the U.S. Treasury to acquire 1 million Bitcoin.
1 million. That's a lot. What percentage of the total supply is that?
It's about 5% of the total supply that will ever exist.
And why is 5% the magic number?
In game theory, that's enough to become the market maker. If the U.S. government, the issuer of the world reserve currency, starts buying Bitcoin at that scale, they signal to the entire planet that this is the new reserve asset. It's a stamp of legitimacy that no other asset has ever received.
It's psychological warfare.
Completely.
It's saying, China, enjoy your heavy analog rocks. We're moving to the cloud. Try and catch up.
And think about the characteristics of Bitcoin versus gold. It's verifiable, it's perfectly scarce, it's portable. You can audit the US Bitcoin holdings on the blockchain in real time from your phone. You can't audit China's gold vaults. You just have to take their word for it. It aligns with Western values of transparency and technology.
So in this Trump shock scenario, the U.S. creates a Nixon shock 2.0. They devalue the dollar, this time against Bitcoin, wipe out the real value of the debt, and re-anchor the entire system to a new digital asset that they control.
It extends American hegemony for another 50 years. Instead of the dollar being backed by nothing, which is the current state,
Or gold, which is China's advantage.
it becomes backed by code, which is America's advantage. Silicon Valley.
But there's another layer to this onion. We talked about the petrodollar, the idea that you needed dollars to buy oil. Kim argues we are moving to the electro-Bitcoin era. I've heard Bitcoin called digital energy before, but I always thought that was just, marketing fluff.
It's actually based on physics and grid economics. It's a really critical concept to grasp. Think about the transition we are going through globally. The 20th century was the oil century. You needed oil for tanks, cars, factories. So the currency that bought oil was king.
Keith petrodollar. Makes sense.
But the 21st century is different. The 21st century is the electricity century. AI, data centers, electric vehicles, robotics, these don't drink gasoline, they eat electrons. The demand for electricity is going parabolic.
Okay, so electricity is the new oil. I get that.
Yeah.
But you can't put electricity in a barrel and ship it across the ocean. It's stuck where it's made.
Exactly. This is the stranded energy problem, and it's a huge problem. If you have a massive hydro dam in a remote part of Canada and it generates power at 3 a.m. when nobody is awake to use it, what happens to that energy?
It's lost.
It's wasted, it's grounded into the earth, it has zero economic value because you can't transport it to where it's needed when it's needed.
Enter Bitcoin.
Enter the miner. You put a shipping container full of Bitcoin miners right next to that dam. You turn that wasted 3 a.m. water flow into cryptographic hashes. You solve math problems. You are effectively converting kinetic energy into a secure digital monetary value. You have liquefied the electricity.
Okay, so you're saying Bitcoin mining can basically turn wasted power into money. It acts like a battery, a monetary battery.
It is stored energy. And the U.S. strategy here, according to Kim, would be to become the gatekeeper of this conversion. If the U.S. controls the Bitcoin layer, and Bitcoin is the base layer currency of the global energy grid, then the U.S. controls the global energy trade, even if they aren't shipping oil tankers around the world.
And this hits China right where it hurts.
It exposes their biggest vulnerability. China is amazing at generating electricity. They have the biggest dams, the best solar panel production, the best grids. But they are still the world's largest importer of the raw inputs, the oil and gas, to run a huge portion of those grids. They are fundamentally dependent on the old system.
While the U.S. is now a net energy exporter.
The U.S. is energy independent, so China is playing the game of 2005 resource security. The U.S., in this scenario, is trying to play the game of 2035 energy monetization.
It's a clash of civilizations. China says gold and commodities. The U.S. says Bitcoin and electrons.
That's the battleground.
This leaves the rest of the world in a really, really awkward spot. The source brings up South Korea, but really, this applies to any country that isn't one of the two superpowers.
This is the survival guide section of the analysis, and it's pretty bleak. Consider a country like South Korea or Japan or Germany. They are resource poor. They don't have major gold mines. They don't have major oil wells.
But they have amazing tech.
Yeah.
Korea has Samsung, Hyundai. They have chips and cars.
They have barter goods. In the current system, that works perfectly fine. Samsung sells phones for dollars, uses those dollars to buy oil from Saudi Arabia. It's seamless. But what happens if the trust in the dollar breaks down before this new Bitcoin system is fully established in that chaotic transition period?
If nobody wants the paper.
Then we return to medieval barter. Kim warns of a freeze or starve scenario for these countries. If Korea can't pay for oil with dollars because the dollar is collapsing, they might have to barter their high-tech goods directly. We will give you a shipload of our best semiconductors for a tanker of liquid natural gas.
That is a terrifying loss of leverage. You're trading your crown jewels, your highest value products, just to keep the lights on for the winter.
That is the risk of being a have-not in a new hard asset world. If you don't hold the primary reserve asset, whether it ends up being gold or Bitcoin, you are at the mercy of those who do. The advice in the source is that these nations need to secure reserves now while the dollar system still functions.
So if you're a country, you need reserves. If you're an individual, you need reserves too, just on a smaller scale.
The logic is identical.
Okay, so let's bring this all the way down to the listener. We've covered $38 trillion in debt, China's gold drain, the potential Trump Bitcoin pivot. If I'm sitting at home with a 401k and a savings account, what does this actually mean for me? What do I do?
It means you need to look at your portfolio and ask a very honest question. How much of this is unallocated?
How much of this is just a paper promise that relies on the system holding together?
Exactly. Let's look at the two big scenarios Kim lays out. Scenario A. The Trump shock happens. The U.S. deliberately devalues the dollar to reindustrialize America. Historically, when the currency is devalued that aggressively, what happens to gold?
It goes up. In the 70s, it went up 20x.
Precisely. So gold is your safety belt. Even if the U.S. ultimately pivots to Bitcoin, gold will likely perform incredibly well in the transition because it is the universal language of financial panic.
Okay. And scenario B, the U.S. actually goes through with it. They announce a strategic Bitcoin reserve.
Then you are looking at the most massive price discovery event in financial history. You have the ultimate whale, the U.S. Treasury entering a market with a fixed supply. The price would, well, it would go parabolic. It would move from being a speculative asset to being a global reserve asset overnight.
So the safe play isn't trying to guess if Bitcoin beats gold or gold beats Bitcoin. It's realizing that they both beat the dollar in these scenarios.
That's the key takeaway. The loser in both scenarios is the person holding cash in a bank account, the person holding the melting ice cube. The source suggests a rotation strategy for capital. Capital flees the dollar. It goes to gold first because that's what the big, slow institutions know and trust with. And eventually, it rotates into Bitcoin as the new digital standard stabilizes.
It's a game of musical chairs. The music is slowing down. The dollar is the chair that is about to be pulled away. And you need to find a seat, either on the gold bench or the Bitcoin bench, before the music stops completely.
That is a perfect analogy. We are watching 4D chess being played by superpowers. China is building a fortress of gold to withstand the collapse of the current system. The U.S. is attempting to build a digital spaceship to escape the collapse entirely and create a new system.
And most people are just standing around in the middle of the field watching TikTok on their phones, totally unaware that the ground is shifting beneath their feet.
Ignorance is bliss, I suppose, until the inflation hits 20% and your savings are cut in half.
I want to leave our listeners with a final thought from the source material. It really circles back to that allocated concept we started with.
Yes. The source poses a question that I think everyone needs to answer for themselves tonight, very seriously.
We know that in the Nixon era, gold went up 20 times. If history rhymes, and we are entering this Trump shock era where the dollar is sacrificed to save the domestic economy, just look at your savings. Look at your 401k.
Look at where your wealth is actually stored. Is it in a bank account that is leveraged 100 to 1? Is it in a bond fund? Is it in a currency that is actively being printed into oblivion to pay for that $38 trillion debt?
Because if it is, you aren't holding wealth. You're holding fuel for the fire.
And when the fire starts, you don't want to be the one holding the kindling. You want to be holding the fire extinguisher.
Gold, Bitcoin.
Yeah.
Real allocated assets.
That's the extinguisher.
This has been a heavy one, but a really important one. We'll be tracking this silent war very closely as it develops. Thanks for taking this deep dive with us.
Stay safe out there.